Welcome to Mythos AI, your source for Cliff's Notes on complex subjects. Join Anna and Phil for yet another engaging conversation.
Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we unpack complex historical events and trends to really dig in and get some valuable insights. Today we're diving into the triangular trade. It was a system that connected Europe, Africa, and the Americas for centuries.
This transatlantic network, well, it really shaped global economies, and it left, a lasting legacy on modern society. To understand its significance, I think we should trace its origins, analyze the structure, and really delve into its profound human and societal consequences.
The triangular trade emerged during a period of intense exploration and expansion by European powers, and it was driven by a quest for resources, wealth, and influence. What were the specific factors that set the stage for this complex system?
Well, the 16th century, I think that marked a turning point. European nations were eager to exploit the resources of all these newly discovered lands. The Portuguese, they were driven by their ambition to find a sea route to the east. They established early trading posts along the African coast, and that actually marked the beginning of their involvement in the transatlantic slave trade.
So the Portuguese were early players in this trade. But they weren't alone, were they? What role did other European powers play in the development of the triangular trade?
You're absolutely right. Spain, Britain, and France, they all joined the race. Driven by similar ambitions of wealth and power, they saw the potential for immense profit in the exploitation of resources and, of course, the labor from the Americas and Africa. This competition among European powers, ultimately, that's what led to the formation of the triangular trade.
Let's break down the structure of the triangular trade. Often it's described as a three-legged system. Can you elaborate on each of these legs and how they were all connected?
Certainly. So the first leg originated from European ports. Ships laden with manufactured goods, things like textiles, firearms, metal goods, set sail for the African coast.
And what was the purpose of these goods? What role did they play in the larger scheme of the triangular trade?
These manufactured goods, well, they were exchanged for enslaved Africans. This was a calculated strategy by European traders. They understood the demand for labor in the Americas. And the profit to be made from exploiting this demand, that's what they were after. They traded these goods with African rulers and traders who participated in the capture and sale of enslaved people.
So this brings us to the second leg of the triangle, the infamous Middle Passage. Can you describe the conditions of this journey and the human cost involved?
The Middle Passage was a horrific journey across the Atlantic. Enslaved Africans endured unimaginable brutality and suffering. Millions of people were forcibly transported in overcrowded ships with minimal food, water, and sanitation. The mortality rates were shockingly high. So many perished due to disease, malnutrition, and abuse. The Middle Passage stands as a chilling testament to the depths of human cruelty inflicted in the pursuit of profit.
It's a truly harrowing chapter in human history.
Ah.
And the third leg of the triangle, that completed this cycle of trade. What goods were transported on this final leg?
The third leg saw the transportation of raw materials from the Americas back to Europe. These goods, primarily sugar, tobacco, and cotton, they were highly sought after in European markets. They fueled European industries and consumer demand. That really perpetuated the cycle of trade and profit that drove the triangular trade.
Let's delve deeper into the economic forces at play here. The triangular trade was a profit-driven enterprise. But how did it fit into the broader economic context of the time? What were the prevailing economic theories that shaped this system?
Well, the dominant economic theory of the time was mercantilism. It emphasized the accumulation of wealth and the maintenance of a favorable balance of trade. Colonies like those in the Americas, they were viewed as instruments to enrich the mother country. They provided raw materials that could be processed and, of course, sold at higher values in Europe, and that generated significant profits for European powers.
So mercantilism essentially placed colonies in a subservient role, extracting resources for the benefit of the European powers. How did this impact the development of early capitalism?
The triangular trade served as a stark example of early capitalism in action. It was a system where profit was the primary motive, and the exploitation of both human and natural resources was rampant. The immense wealth generated through slave labor and those plantation economies of the Americas that played a crucial role in the accumulation of capital that fueled the Industrial Revolution in Europe.
So the triangular trade's impact extended beyond just the immediate profits generated. It played a significant role in shaping the economic landscape of Europe and ultimately contributed to the rise of industrial capitalism. But we've talked about the economic forces that drove the triangular trade, but it's crucial to acknowledge the devastating human cost of this system. The Middle Passage, as we've discussed, was a horrific journey. But what about the lives of those who survived this ordeal? What awaited them in the Americas?
The enslaved Africans who survived the Middle Passage were subjected to a life of relentless toil and dehumanization. They were treated as commodities, bought and sold at the whim of their owners. Their labor was the backbone of the plantation economies of the Americas, particularly in the production of cash crops like sugar, tobacco, and cotton.
The plantation system was designed to extract maximum profit from the labor of enslaved people. Can you elaborate on the conditions they faced on these plantations?
Plantations were brutal environments. Enslaved people were forced to work long hours under grueling conditions. They were subjected to harsh punishments for any perceived transgressions and denied basic human rights. Their lives were entirely controlled by their owners who held absolute power over them.
Beyond the physical brutality, what were the psychological and social impacts of this system of enslavement?
The psychological trauma inflicted on enslaved Africans was immense. They were forcibly separated from their families and communities, stripped of their identities and subjected to constant degradation. The dehumanizing nature of slavery, it had lasting consequences, shaping the social and racial hierarchies that persisted long after its abolition.
We've talked about the horrors of slavery, but it's also important to recognize the resilience and agency of the African people. How did they resist this system and preserve their culture in the face of such adversity?
Despite the brutality they faced, enslaved Africans found ways to resist their oppressors. They engaged in acts of sabotage, slowed down work, and even staged full-scale revolts on plantations. The establishment of maroon communities, settlements formed by escaped slaves, that was another form of resistance. These communities offered a refuge from slavery and allowed escaped slaves to rebuild their lives and preserve their cultural traditions.
These acts of resistance highlight the indomitable spirit of those who were enslaved. But resistance took many forms, didn't it? What about the role of culture in preserving a sense of identity and community among enslaved Africans?
Culture played a vital role in the survival and resilience of enslaved Africans. They found ways to preserve their traditions, adapt them to their new environment, and create new forms of cultural expression. Music, dance, storytelling, and religious practices became powerful tools for maintaining a sense of community and identity in the face of oppression.
Can you give us some specific examples of how African cultural traditions were preserved and transformed in the Americas?
Certainly. The blending of African musical traditions with European and indigenous elements, well, that led to the emergence of new musical genres, like blues and jazz in the United States. These genres reflect the creativity and resilience of African culture and its enduring legacy in the Americas.
Food is another powerful expression of culture. How did African culinary traditions influence the cuisine of the Americas?
African ingredients and cooking techniques were adapted to the available resources in the Americas, leading to the development of unique and flavorful dishes. Gumbo in Louisiana, that's a prime example of this blending of cultures. It combines West African ingredients like okra and seafood with European and Native American influences, creating a dish that is both delicious and culturally significant.
The triangular trade not only shaped the cultural landscape of the Americas, but it also had a profound impact on the demographics of the region. The forced migration of millions of Africans created the African diaspora. Can you elaborate on the significance of this diaspora?
The African diaspora refers to the global community of people of African descent who were dispersed as a result of the transatlantic slave trade. This diaspora has had a profound impact on the world, shaping cultural, social, and political movements. From the Haitian Revolution to the Civil Rights Movement in the United States, the African diaspora has been at the forefront of struggles for freedom, equality, and justice.
The triangular trade was ultimately a system built on exploitation and injustice. How did the morality of this system come to be questioned, and what led to the rise of abolition movements?
By the 18th century, Enlightenment ideals emphasizing human rights and individual liberty began to influence thinking about slavery. Religious groups, like the Quakers, were also early and vocal opponents of slavery. They argued that it was a moral abomination, incompatible with Christian beliefs.
So there was a growing sense of moral outrage against slavery. But what were the key factors that led to the abolition of the slave trade?
The abolition movement gained momentum in the late 18th and early 19th centuries, driven by a combination of factors: the tireless efforts of abolitionists, the publication of powerful first-hand accounts of slavery like Olaudah Equiano's autobiography, and changing economic conditions all contributed to the shift in public opinion.
The economic argument against slavery was an interesting one. Can you elaborate on how economic factors played a role in the abolition movement?
While moral arguments against slavery were gaining traction, economic realities were also changing. The Industrial Revolution was transforming European economies, reducing their reliance on plantation agriculture and slave labor. In Britain, for example, industrialists saw free wage labor as more efficient and profitable than slave labor. This economic shift, combined with growing moral concerns, created a powerful force for abolition.
The abolition of the slave trade was a landmark achievement, but it didn't erase the legacy of centuries of exploitation and injustice. How did the triangular trade shape the world we live in today?
The triangular trade's legacy is multifaceted, and it continues to shape the world in profound ways. It laid the foundation for global capitalism and influenced patterns of trade and migration. It also left an indelible mark on social and racial hierarchies, contributing to the inequalities and injustices that persist in many parts of the world today.
Let's break down these legacies one by one, starting with the economic impact. How did the triangular trade shape global capitalism as we know it?
The triangular trade generated vast wealth for European powers. This wealth was invested in industrial development, infrastructure, and financial institutions, laying the groundwork for the rise of modern capitalism. The profits from the slave trade played a crucial role in the accumulation of capital that fueled European economic expansion and global dominance.
So the economic benefits of the triangular trade were largely concentrated in Europe. How did this impact the economic development of Africa and the Americas?
The triangular trade had a devastating impact on the economies of Africa and the Americas. It led to the underdevelopment of African economies, which were stripped of their human capital and resources. In the Americas, the plantation economies based on slave labor, well, they created a system of dependency that hindered the development of diversified and sustainable economies.
The economic disparities between the global North and the global South can be traced back to the exploitative systems established during the triangular trade. But the legacy of the triangular trade extends beyond economics, doesn't it? What about its social and cultural impacts?
The triangular trade had a profound impact on social and racial relations worldwide. It reinforced racist ideologies that justified the enslavement and exploitation of Africans. These ideologies led to the establishment of racial hierarchies that persisted long after the abolition of slavery and continue to shape social structures and inequalities today.
The cultural impact of the triangular trade is equally significant. We've already touched upon the resilience of African culture and the emergence of new cultural forms. But how did this cultural exchange shape the Americas and the world?
The forced migration of Africans resulted in a vibrant blending of cultures in the Americas. African music, dance, food, and religious practices infused with European and indigenous traditions created dynamic and diverse cultural landscapes. This cultural fusion is a testament to the resilience and creativity of the African people and their enduring legacy in shaping the cultural tapestry of the Americas.
The triangular trade is a complex and challenging topic to grapple with. It forces us to confront the darkest chapters of human history and to acknowledge the lasting impact of those events on the world we live in today. But what lessons can we learn from this history? And how can we use this knowledge to inform a more just and equitable future?
The triangular trade serves as a stark reminder of the dangers of greed, exploitation, and the dehumanization of others. It compels us to examine the systems and structures that perpetuate injustice and to work towards dismantling them. The history of the triangular trade also highlights the resilience and agency of those who resisted oppression and fought for freedom and equality. Their struggles offer inspiration and guidance as we continue to address the legacies of this dark chapter in human history.
We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive into the triangular trade. We've explored its origins, its structure, its economic and human costs, and its enduring legacies. What key takeaways do you think are most important for our listeners to remember?
The triangular trade was a complex system, driven by profit and power that had devastating consequences for millions of people. It reshaped global economies and left a lasting legacy of inequality and injustice. But it also revealed the resilience and creativity of the human spirit and the enduring power of resistance and the fight for freedom.
Understanding the history of the triangular trade is crucial for understanding the world we live in today. It helps us to recognize the interconnectedness of our past, present, and future, and to appreciate the ongoing struggles for justice and equality that are rooted in this complex and challenging history.
The triangular trade, well, it wasn't just, a singular event in history. It was deeply intertwined with other global systems and networks. To fully grasp its impact, I think we need to consider those broader connections.
That's an important point. Let's start by examining how the triangular trade influenced and was influenced by other global trade networks. What other systems were operating simultaneously, and how did they intersect?
The triangular trade was intricately linked with other major trade routes of the time, particularly those connecting Europe to Asia. The wealth accumulated through that Atlantic slave trade, well, that provided capital for European ventures in the Indian Ocean region, fueling the growth of colonial empires in Asia.
So the profits extracted from the Americas were used to further expand European influence in other parts of the world. Were there specific commodities or trade goods that connected these different systems?
Absolutely. The demand for goods like sugar and cotton produced through slave labor in the Americas, well, that extended to Asian markets. European traders, they used those profits from the triangular trade to purchase Asian goods, like spices, tea, and silk, which were then sold in Europe at a significant markup.
This interconnectedness highlights how the triangular trade wasn't an isolated system. It was a key component of a larger web of global trade that shaped economic and power dynamics across continents.
Precisely. The triangular trade's influence extended far beyond the Atlantic, leaving its mark on the economic and social landscapes of Asia as well.
We've talked about the global impact, but let's zoom in on Europe itself. How did the triangular trade specifically shape the development of European cities and economies?
The triangular trade, it fueled the growth of major European port cities. Places like Bristol, Liverpool, and Nantes. Those cities became bustling centers of trade, shipbuilding, and finance, attracting merchants, bankers, and laborers.
So the wealth generated through the triangular trade had a direct impact on the physical and economic expansion of these urban centers. Did this growth benefit all segments of European society?
While the triangular trade enriched many European merchants and investors, those benefits weren't evenly distributed. The working class, they often faced harsh working conditions and low wages in the shipyards and factories that supported the trade. The triangular trade, while contributing to overall economic growth, also exacerbated existing social inequalities.
That brings up an important point about the complexities of the triangular trade's legacy. It's not a simple narrative of progress and prosperity. It's intertwined with exploitation, inequality, and those lasting scars of slavery.
Exactly. It's a story of both immense wealth creation and profound human suffering. It's a reminder that economic growth, without ethical considerations, can have devastating consequences.
As we conclude this deep dive into the triangular trade, it's clear that its legacy is multifaceted and continues to shape our world in profound ways. It's a history that compels us to grapple with uncomfortable truths about our past and to use this knowledge to inform a more just and equitable future.
Indeed. The triangular trade offers valuable lessons about the interconnectedness of global systems, the long-term consequences of exploitation, and the importance of ethical considerations in economic pursuits. It's a history that should make us reflect on the choices we make today and how they might shape the world for generations to come.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the triangular trade. We hope this exploration has provided valuable insights and sparked your curiosity to continue learning about this complex and impactful chapter in human history.
Thanks for listening to Mythos AI. Stay tuned for more concise insights. And remember to hit the like button and subscribe for future episodes.